essay on my critical reflection: how does your product challenge conventions and how does it represent social groups and issues? So first of all, our product, Love Carmilla, was intended to be a feminist representation of women and a kind of, not an insult to the patriarchy, but in a way challenging the patriarchy and the stereotypes they've created for women. So if we go into the history of where the inspiration came from for Love Carmilla, it all started in second wave feminism and the uprise of female independence. So we wanted Carmilla to represent both of our genres in one person: thriller and chick flick. And it was hard to create a strong, powerful, intelligent woman who is also feminine. And I was thinking, why is that? Why does a strong, powerful, independent woman not have to be feminine? And this is because feminine things were seen to uphold patriarchal ideas. So you probably heard of, in second wave feminism, people used to burn their bras. They used to believe high heels were a idea of the patriarchy and given to women to please men. But now what society considers masculine is seen as superior. So you'll often see in films such as Hunger Games, for example. We all know that the protagonist in the Hunger Games is very masculine, and she appears to not be able to perform feminine traits or wear feminine clothes. You'll see the same in Miss Congeniality, I think it's called, where she is obviously a very intelligent woman and she fails to execute femininity, stereotypical femininity, in the way that you would expect a woman to. So it's rare to see women that are powerful and intelligent who are also classified as feminine. So when we're introduced to characters that are powerful, intelligent, and feminine, they are usually the most memorable characters, which is the effect that we wanted to give. For example, Elle Woods in Legally Blonde, she is smart and feminine at the same time, and she also contradicts the usual views of the ditzy Malibu Barbie, which we also included in our script, because we wanted Carmilla to also kind of be powerful herself, but be affected in a way by the societal stereotypes. So she believes that the ditzy Malibu Barbie is a bad thing, obviously. So she is taking advantage of societal views of women, like ditzy Malibu Barbie, that obviously represents a dumb blonde girl. So she takes advantage of that stereotype for her own need, depicting her own intelligence and her own social awareness in a way. The same characterization is also around Sharpay in High School Musical. She is demonized for being a blonde mean girl, but she's actually very smart and she knows what she wants, and no one likes her. They see her as a bully when actually she is just an ultra feminine, strong woman. As well as in Jennifer's Body, that is probably the most, I feel like we were trying to go with a bit of Jennifer and Elle Woods mixed together within our characterization of Carmilla, because Jennifer is obviously clearly very feminine, very stereotypically mean girl, feminine, but at the same time she holds a sense of power that makes people fear her as a character, which is beneficial to her, obviously, because though she does conform to the male gaze, she also she's aware of that, and she holds a sense of power towards that, which does also kind of relate to the book Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, where she explains, I'll give you some context to the book. In the book, she is a big Hollywood actress, and she explains how she played the part and conformed to the male gaze and acted like she didn't know men wanted her for impeccable looks and body, when she actually was aware, and she used that to her advantage to gain power in the industry, which is very smart. So now I'm going to talk about the male gaze and how we tried to avoid that in our film. So the male gaze affects female representation in film, obviously, and it was proposed by Laura Mulvey, and it argues that women in film are too often shown as passive objects of a male heterosexual gaze. So you'll obviously see this everywhere. More men than women produce, write, and direct films. So obviously everything will be seen in a male point of view. And how often do you see a male character being gazed at? Maybe more recently, but the majority of films you never really see the female gaze being performed. It's always the male gaze, and you'll definitely recognize it happening because the camera usually gazes and lingers on the body part of a female, and you'll see this in many different films. You'll see it in Wolf of Wall Street, you'll see it in The Other Woman, where it basically shows a full shot of this woman running in slow motion, getting out of the water, all of that jazz. Like, you see it in most films. Suicide Squad, when there's a whole sequence of Harley Quinn getting dressed, it's very strange, and you definitely recognize it once you know the theory. So we tried to steer away from that. Though Carmilla was wearing a low cut shirt, that was meant to be her expressing her sexuality in a way that she is clearly proud of, and there was no gaze of the camera that you will definitely see if a woman is showing cleavage in a male directed film. They will definitely zoom in, gaze on the area, make sure that everyone's aware of that particular body's part, and they'll also show male reactions or female reactions after that, where like they're clearly stunned by it. Adam Sandler actually does this a lot, because in Grown Ups 2, I believe, or Grown Ups 1, there's a whole clip of this woman fixing a car, and they're all just staring at her. Like, that is the male gaze to a T, and it is shown as comedic, when in conclusion, usually women in everyday life, like regular women, are applying the male gaze to themselves without even knowing. So they'll be concentrating on how they look. Even when men are not around, they'll end up applying the male gaze to themselves because it's normalized now. And we definitely tried to get rid of that in our opening sequence of Carmilla. But in Evaluation, to some extent, our opening sequence may also conform to the demonization of femininity. And this is because even though our protagonist is strong and powerful and intelligent, she's a killer as well. So is the narrative kind of contradictory to our purpose? Because why does an ultra-feminine protagonist have to have something wrong with her every time? For example, in Mean Girls, why does Regina George have to be very feminine? And of course, Katie is the typical, relatable, non-feminine, doesn't know how to be feminine. But when she does get feminine, she's suddenly evil. Why does Regina George have to be evil and feminine? And why does Katie, as soon as she becomes feminine and creates that image of the plastics within her, why does that make her evil? So it's kind of, are we contradicting ourselves in that way? If we really do evaluate the characterization of Carmilla, if we really wanted to depict a powerful woman, then shouldn't she be powerful in the right ways, like Elle Woods? I think it would be really hard to depict a feminine, powerful woman without conforming to some of the stereotypes, because obviously we're all impacted by society. And as well as this, if we wanted to depict a thriller genre through our protagonist, it was definitely seen as more interesting and more engaging if she were to contradict the stereotypes of a clear chick flick protagonist, just like they do in Jawbreaker and Jennifer's Body. That is kind of the vibe we were going for, to represent the chick flick thriller, the unexpected deceptiveness of femininity and women in general. Like, you don't expect that from a feminine woman because it's demonized in the media. You've demonized femininity. The main women that are usually popular are the ones that have really no personality, or kind of tomboyish, or like that have valuable male traits. So you see this everywhere. For example, Bella Swan in Twilight, she's clearly very boring. She doesn't know how to be feminine. She doesn't dance. Also, it's like she's seen as a very relatable character, when in conclusion she doesn't really have any personality. She is made to be dull and relatable so that audiences can project their own values and personality onto her, so they feel like they're in that world with her. So we kind of wanted to shy away from that value with Carmilla, because she is meant to be independent and her own unique person. We don't want audiences' personalities to shine through onto her. We don't want her to be seen as relatable, because obviously she's a killer, but we still want her to be seen as a weapon against the patriarchy, and someone who doesn't stand for anyone's crap and knows how to protect herself, and is smart enough to get away with things, and is smart enough to use her own beauty, like I described the Evelyn Hugo, the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo's book. She is smart enough to use her own beauty and use societal's expectations of feminine women to her own advantage, and I feel like that is a very effective and very unconventional almost representation of what you'd expect feminism to be in the media. Because when we think of feminism, we think of Charlie's Angels and we think of Wonder Woman, but of course they are to some extent feminist films, but are they feminine? Why do these films always depict the typical short-haired, unfeminine girl that tends to be the most powerful, or the most basic, personalityless person to be defined as powerful, when we could have someone like Elle Woods, who is obviously an icon in film, and she's an icon for a reason, because she is, not only is she relatable to girls that love to be feminine and that express their femininity through their outfits and hair and looking good, and they don't do it for themselves. Clearly that is represented through Elle Woods. They do it for, they don't do it for men, they do it for themselves. So that is what we wanted Carmilla to embody. We want her to embody that power and that sophistication in femininity, and we wanted her to be self-aware of her beauty, self-aware of her effect on men and the patriarchy, and use that to her advantage. And I feel like we executed that well within the opening sequence, though it could be argued contradictory to our message, since she is a killer. But I think overall she was represented in a way that we intended, and it was clear to audiences that she was unconventional. The chick flick protagonist, as soon as the voiceover got to the middle, when the colour changed, everything contributed to her being unstereotypical and powerful.